Come, let us explore the best rainbow body meditation routine for beginners. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit, which begins, how to achieve rainbow body in a single lifetime? The question continues, overambitious? Or maybe this is asked already. But just curious to know about your views on what it takes to achieve this feat. Mila Repa and Mila and a few others are said to have achieved this. What is the plan of action you would give to someone who is 25 and desires to attain full Buddhahood in a single lifetime? So, Mazel Tov, your enthusiasm is exquisite, and I've got news for you. That was exactly what the Buddha always intended. When we look at the history of Buddhism, we see that his original students were of every caste and every gender, and that the goals was not only for each of them to accomplish full Buddhahood in a single lifetime, but if we consider the penultimate statement in the Satipatthana Sutta, it was to accomplish full enlightenment within 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. If someone tells you this cannot be done, thank them for their time and go find another teacher. This can totally be done. And in fact, it can be done in a joyful and tranquil way. If someone says the only way to do this is through extreme hardship and it's very stressful, then then in the words of Bugs Bunny, they took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. So let's put things into perspective. And this is going to be a bit negative, but that's the only way I know how to begin. Sturgeon's Law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, but not in the fun, tingly way. So in other words, 90% of people and 90% of meditation instructors tend to actually feel that being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel is awesome. And it's where it's at. It's what you should do too. And only an extreme minority feel that it's far, far better to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. After doing this full time for multiple decades, I can tell you, being rigid, fearful, superstitious, and controlling will get you many places fast, but in those places aren't peace or love or resourcefulness or enlightenment. The way to get there is the path of being flexible, loving, rational, laid back. And here's a very sad example. The more rigid we are, the more literal-minded we could be, the more difficulty we will have in recognizing a metaphor and then instead treating it as something literal, which could be, if you found me on the internet, you're probably more enthusiastic to be flexible. And so if you found me on the internet, this is going to seem like child's play, but check this out. Let us keep things simple. Let's look at a simple example of a literal statement, a simile, and then a metaphor. Would that be okay? Okay. Literal statement. Jeff is tenacious. All right, straightforward. And now a simile. Jeff is as tenacious as a chow with a bone. All right, paints a vivid picture. Now let's turn that into a metaphor. Jeff is a chow with a bone. Well, it takes a very special type of stupid. to mistake that last statement for something literal. Really? Jeff prounces about the countryside on all fours, eager to sniff the asses of strangers. I don't think so, for such things are frowned upon in polite society. Similarly, when people are rigid and controlling, they will tend to be elitist, making themselves feel amazing by making others feel disempowered. And so they do that through, one of the ways to do that is through superstition. Well, the only way for you to become a Buddha is to go through all these ordeals to learn the sacred and cryptic secrets, sew yourself up in a tent, meditate in a special way, die, and leave nothing behind but hair and fingernails. Yeah, that might be pretty bitchin', and that might be really impress your friends, over the water cooler. But the Buddha didn't teach that. The Buddha said you can master the path in a week. And then you get to live afterwards and have an awesome life and help others do likewise. So we must not have a superstitious, fearful, elitist view. We must open ourselves up to the fact that we can be egalitarian, that the Buddhist teachings are for everyone. In the Patinabbana Sutta, it is recorded that as the Buddha lay dying, felled by an assassin's poisonous mushroom, he explained, I have taught with an outstretched arm and an open hand, keeping no secrets. You know who keeps secrets? Rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel folks. You know who shares secrets? The flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. So, what is this enlightenment business? It's quite simple. It's super simple. Ask a biologist. They will tell you that there are stressors. Some are circumstantial, some are physical, some are interpersonal, and some are mental. We evolved the ability to perceive stress not as a bug, but as a feature to increase the chance of us living long enough to procreate, because that's really the test of evolution. We developed many survival mechanisms, three of which are the impulse to shove at some things, to reach for other things, and to cling to other things. Occasionally, this can save our life. Now, the only problem is that sometimes these primal drives stop being tools and start being tyrants. When these survival mechanisms control every choice and utterance and deeds, we're not going to have a fulfilling life. In our underbrain, we have two reward systems. One is dopamine-oriented, the other is oxytocin-oriented. One rewards with pleasure, the other rewards with fulfillment. The dopamine-oriented reward system is designed to not satisfy and always tantalize you for the next bit of pleasure. That's how our bodies ensure the spreading of our genetic material. According to legend, the Buddha was raised a prince, raised with every privilege, wealth and fame and power. No pleasure was off the table. After 30 years of this, he's like, this isn't fulfilling. It's fun, but it's not fulfilling. Let's find fulfillment. And the rest of his life was dedicated to the universal attainment of fulfillment. The Buddha found the way to do that. That enlightenment was simply mastery of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. But what does mastery mean? As a child, we at first found the task of potty training or tying our shoes or riding a bike to be daunting, did we not? Eventually, we got so good at it that we could practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. That's mastery. The key to the Buddha's Eightfold Path is the seventh fold of mindfulness and the eighth fold of meditation. Practice that. And these two will drive the rest of the path. Practice this, and we will transcend the tyranny of our anxious and aggressive amygdala and excite our anterior cingulate gyrus, the seat of empathy, which pertains to 50% of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. The highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived, and that gives birth to the effortless effort that is the sixth fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. Sit and in mindfulness, and even if you try not to, you can't help but notice change. You notice change in what you see, we hear, what we feel, what we taste, what we smell, and the like. We notice change in what we emote, intend, reason, recall, and imagine. Our life is in a constant state of flux, a three-ring circus, if you will. That makes the mastery of right view an inevitability. This Eightfold Path can be mastered in less than 7 years, 7 quarters, 7 months, 7 fortnights, 7 weeks, or even 7 days. And a delicious metaphor of this can be Diamond Mind's rainbow body, which I look forward to practicing with you together as a team after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Welcome. Oopsie, let's try this again. For more than 30 years, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you will not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. So, quit like a bunny. Let's practice the latest iteration of Diamond Mind Rainbow Body. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist meditation, or how to apply them, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window. Let's start by playing with the second fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. Please chant with me. In our compassion may we long to free all beings from the toxic tyranny of ever, hating, craving, and clinging, metaphorically known as the three mental poisons. In our pragmatism may our liberation of all others be fueled by our reliance on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students, described by the metaphor of the three wish-fulfilling jewels. So we're going to take all these words and squeeze them down into just 8 syllables. May we free all through the 3 jewels. Now, if you want, you don't have to. But I find it fun to blend this with Tibetan calisthenics, also known as Buddha bowing. So I'm going to swing the camera to the right. And if you want, you can follow along. Oy vey. Okay, here we go. May we, free all, through thee, three jewels. May we free all, through thee, three jewels. May we, let's see, free all, through thee, three jewels. May we, free all, through thee, three jewels. Well, that was invigorating. That'll wake you up first thing in the morning. And now let us, as we breathe in, silently, mentally, and passively reciting the demonstrative pronoun this, we can notice what's going on vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. As we, during our exhalation, as silently, mentally, and passively we recite the one-syllable verb ease, we can physically relax and mentally release. Having rested in the nature of mind, let us review the meaning of this six-syllable mantra together. Om, I invoke the mastery of love and letting go, that can add diamond benza-like strength to a simple mind. Whom may all beings enjoy such mastery. So let us bring the four bases of mindfulness into the conventional practice of love and letting go, the second fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. And allow me to remind you that the essence of morality is wishing others well, intentional kindness. The essence of interpersonal morality is kind communication. The essence of physical morality is nonviolence, or kind behavior, and the essence of circumstantial morality is kind commerce, or trading, competition and cruelty for cooperation and kindness. Let's explore this right now. Please chant with me. May all clear minds of all beings now be as peacefully enlightened as the mind of a real or imagined Buddha, symbolized by a tikle one syllable zero bija mantra. So what we're going to do is take all these words and squeeze them down into 6 syllables that we're going to divide between our inhalation and our exhalation. Having grown somewhat comfortable with these 6 syllables, we can recite them all together during our inhalation. What shall we do during our exhalation? We can physically relax as best we can while striving to chant this mantra 8 times per breath. Now, if this is your first time hanging out with me, please give yourself permission to have a learning curve. Om benza zato hung, 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 om benza zato hung. Together. May all relationships or speech of all beings now be as joyfully loving as a real or imagined Buddha speech symbolized by a mala mantra. Once again, we're going to compress this into 6 syllables. Om benza zato hung, 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 om benza zato hung. May all bodies or forms of all beings now enjoy the beautiful halcyon and Buddhist statuary, depicting the blissful body of a real or imagined Yidam archetype of enlightenment such as Dorje Sempa. What is Dorje Sempa? Simply an archetype. Om benza zato hung, 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 om benza zato hung. May all circumstances or lots of all beings now have the safe good fortune or boon, as a Buddha's real or imagined paradise, land or vati. That's right, folks. It's like a fever dream of Maxfield Parrish, isn't it? Om Benza Satuhung, 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 Om Benza Satuhung. And now, let us bring whatever we... Now, having brought the four bases of mindfulness, the mental, the interpersonal, the physical, and the circumstantial, into the path of empathy, let us rest the mind. How shall we do that? As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, we can kick back and vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly watch the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. At last we come, rather than, allow me, please chant with me. Rather than indulge or controlling tendencies with the follies of active visualization, emotion, magic, and belief, we could just recite these words in harmony with our breathing and allow our subconscious to do the heavy lifting. Let us sidestep the rigidity that confuses metaphors for statements literal. and relax into the flexibilities that savors the chance explaining metaphors as similes. So now let us view letting go through a philosophical lens as we bring the illusion of the horizontal duality of us and them into the dance of impermanence and interdependence known as Madhyamaka's yoga of inconceivability. Please chant with me. How could visible circumstances or lots be as impermanent and interdependent as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this body or form? So, notice how we're not using rigid verbs like these circumstances are impermanent, but we are working with something soft like the phrase could be, which is much more flexible. We're working with a rhetorical question, which means we do not actively strive to answer it. Welcome to the lazy bastard path of enlightenment. We are using the verb melt as a metaphor of impermanence. We're using the verb absorb as a metaphor of interdependence. And in irony worthy of O. Henry, how are we going to transcend our self-centeredness? By indulging it. So, now that we have an idea of what's going on behind the scenes, let's chant this one more time. How could visible circumstances or lots be as impermanent and interdependent as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this body or form? And just like before, we're going to take all these numerous words and condense them down into just 6 syllables, which we're going to divide between our inhalation and our exhalation. Our exhalation. Remembering that this question is purely rhetorical. Having grown more comfortable with these 6 syllables, we can now recite them silently and mentally during our inhalation. What shall we do during the exhalation? We can physically relax as best we can while striving to chant these 6 syllables 8 times per breath. And if this is your first time hanging out with me, please give yourself permission to have a learning curve. Om Menza Saduhung, 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 Om Menza Saduhung. Allow me to draw your attention to a pattern. A few moments ago, we brought the 4 bases of mindfulness into the path of love. Those 4 bases of mindfulness were the mental, the interpersonal, the physical, and the circumstantial. Now we're going to bring those same 4 bases of mindfulness into the path of letting go. This reminds me of something explained by the late Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, that Tantra is based on sutra with which it must never contradict. All the Mahayogas are based on sutra. They're just exploring sutra with a bit of the old metaphor. That's it. Please chant with me. How could sensual bodies or forms be as impermanent and interdependent as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this communicational speech? benza satu hung, om 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 benza satu hung. How could resounding interpersonal communication or speech be as impermanent and interdependent, as if it could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this awareness or mind? Om benza satu hung, 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 om benza satu hung. If you've just joined us, welcome aboard. What we're going to do is use simile and metaphor to viscerally better understand impermanence and interdependence. Please chant with me. How could lucid minds be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into our vast empty void? So, we're using gentle verb phrases as opposed to rigid ones, which is terribly important. Number two, we're using the verb melt as a metaphor of impermanence, and the verb absorb as a metaphor of interdependence. But what do we mean by a vast empty void? This is a phrase couched in mystery, used in much Mahayana literature. Let's explore that by recapturing our momentum at the top of the page. How could lucid minds be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into our vast empty void? Like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which although tantalizing to the eye could be not graspable to the hand. So there you go. Emptiness was only always a metaphor of non-graspability. So we're going to take all these words and squeeze them down into just 6 syllables, which we're going to divide between our inhalation and our exhalation. And remember, this question is purely rhetorical. Having grown somewhat comfortable with this 6-syllable phrase, we can now recite it silently, mentally, and passively during our inhalation. What shall we do during our exhalation? Well, we can physically relax as best we can while striving to chant this 6-syllable mantra 8 times per breath. And if this is your first time hanging out with me, please give yourself permission to have a learning curve. Om benza satu hung, 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 om benza satu hung. Now let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and release. Well, that sounds quite lovely, but how do we do that? Simple. We silently and mentally and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation. As we do, we can vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly observe the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. So let's do this for 4 sets of 12 rounds. Let's pretend that a round is simply one inhalation followed by one exhalation. An easy way to keep track of that is to use the creases of your 4 fingers of your right hand. During each inhalation, please advance the tip of your right thumb. We'll start with our index finger and work our way to the little finger. Simply follow along. Now you've learned how to count to 16 on just 4 fingers and 1 thumb, which is pretty cool. Now let's count 4 sets of 16 rounds. And we do that quite simply. We keep track of that on our left hand. And a simple way of doing that is to touch the tip of your left thumb to first the index finger for the first set, the middle finger for the second set, the ring finger for the third set, and the little finger for the fourth set. That sequence is important when it comes to your channel's ones and drops. So let us begin with the left index finger and then count on the right. I recommend that for ergonomics, just to keep your hands in your lap while doing all this counting business. And yes, it can feel awkward the first time you do it, but play with it once every 12 hours, and within a week or so, it'll be effortless. So on our left hand, we are keeping track of our fourth set. On our right hand, we're going to count 16 rounds or 16 reps. And that's quite simple. As we inhale, we will advance the tip of our left thumb on various creases and tips. Simply follow along to get a clue. As we inhale, we will silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this to help us to practice mindfulness. And as we exhale, we will silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb ease to help us practice the meditation of release. We always start with our index finger and end with the little finger. That's best for you energetically. All right. Now let us repeat portions of the cycle. We restart the cycle by bringing the four bases of mindfulness into the conventional practice of love and release. Om Benza Satuhung, 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 Om Benza Satuhung. Om Benza Satuhung, 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 Om Benza Satuhung. Om Benza Satuhung, 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 Om Benza Satuhung. Let us bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and release. Having trained in love and letting go, we now begin training in impermanence and interdependence. Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung. Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung. Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung. Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung Om Benza Sadu Hung Benza Sadu Hung. And now let us rest in the nature of mind. Let us return to love. Let us continue. Let us again bring the four bases of mindfulness into the path of love.
Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum. Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum. Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum Om Benzazatuhum Benzazatuhum.
And now let us rest in the nature of mind. How do we do that? During our inhalation, we practice mindfulness by silently, mentally, and passively reciting the demonstrative pronoun this. We practice meditation during our exhalation by silently, mentally, and passively reciting the one-syllable verb ease. And now let us bring the same four bases of mindfulness into the path of letting go. So it looks like you've just joined, so I think some explanation would be nice. Please chant with me. How could visible circumstances or lots be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this body or form? So we're going to take all these words, squeeze them down into 6 syllables, which we're going to divide between our inhalation and our exhalation. Now, of course, this is rhetorical. Having grown somewhat comfortable with these 6 syllables, we can recite them during our inhalation. During our exhalation, we can physically relax as best we can while striving to chant this 6-syllable mantra 8 times per breath. And if this is your first time hanging out with me, please give yourself permission to have a learning curve. Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung. How could sensual bodies or forms be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this communicational speech? Allow me to insult your intellect. We're using the verb melt as a metaphor of impermanence. We're using the verb absorb as a metaphor of interdependence. Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung. How could such resounding interpersonal communication or speech be as impermanent and interdependent, as if it could blissfully melt into a rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this awareness or mind? Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung. How could lucid minds be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into a vast empty void, like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although tantalizing to the eye, could be non-graspable to the hand. Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung Om benza satuhung benza satuhung. And oopsie, now let's rest in the nature of mind. Let us seal this practice by chanting love and letting go's wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. May all lots of all beings appearing in Vornu be as safely fortunate as a pure land of law represented in Buddhist paintings. May all minds of all beings lucid yet Vornu be as peacefully enlightened as a Buddha's mind symbolized by a one-sort of Mumisha. May all speech of all beings resounding in Vornu be as joyfully loving as a Buddha's speech symbolized by mantra. May all forms of all beings sensual yet Vornu be as beautifully healthy as a Yadamak type depicted in Buddhist statuary. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 5¼ hours or so, I would very much like to return to lead today's afternoon group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.